Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. So today, we have some rather interesting developments to talk about and discuss. We continue to see this buildup of Ukrainian forces. More importantly, the movement of Ukrainian forces around the battlescape. Positioning forces, then moving forces again, repositioning forces. And I got to tell you, the telegraphing of the prospective offensive that could take place near Zaporizhia, south of Zaporizhia, near Orikhiv, have all the telltale signs of a deception plan. This reminds me very much of what the United States did during the first Gulf War. During the first Gulf War, the United States was constantly moving around units, heavy armored units. They were playing games with the 1st Cavalry Division, moving that all over the place. They were also using the Marines as well as telegraphing a large amphibious operation on the coast of Kuwait, and we know that never occurred. We know that the operation that took place in 1991 against the Iraqis looked much different than the Iraqis believed that invasion was going to look like. So what is going to happen in the coming days and weeks in Ukraine? Is it possible that the movement and deployment of these Ukrainian forces, especially down here near Orikhiv, is a deception plan? Is the Ukrainian objective someplace else? Now, there's some other things going on in the war that is also changing the way the Ukrainians are looking to engage the Russians, and that is the Russian capability to jam American GPS systems. The Ukrainian HIMARS, which were incredibly effective, or had been very effective throughout much of the conflict, has over the course of the conflict, and now where we're at now, the HIMARS is simply not as effective because the Russians are jamming those signals that make the HIMARS such a precision instrument of war. So where the Ukrainians were under the belief that they could march south into Zaporizhia, possibly looking to move into Melitopol, Tokmak, sever the land corridor, and a lot of that strategy was going to be based on the deployment of those HIMARS systems in conjunction with U.S. intelligence being fed to the Ukrainians. Hey, there's a Russian unit here. Here's the GPS coordinates. Fire your HIMARS. Hey, there's a Russian battalion tactical group dug in this area. Unleash hell with the HIMARS. They don't have that capability now. The jamming that is taking place with the Russian electronic warfare systems is disallowing that strategy for the Ukrainians. Now, is it possible that the U.S., NATO will counter that in some way? Yeah, it is possible. And I have a feeling right now that is what's happening on the ground. They're trying to figure out a way to disallow the jamming of those HIMARS systems where they can once again become as effective as they once were. Because right now, the HIMARS is being eliminated from the equation. We've seen the HIMARS being eliminated from the equation. Before that, it was the TB2 Bayraktar. Remember that? Remember the fanfare. Remember the videos that system was getting. It's basically not taking to the sky now. The last report, the reported use of a Bayraktar was over Kiev, where they lost control over it and they had to shoot it down. And then again, the Bayraktars, the TB2s, flying over the line of contact, the front line, just isn't happening now because of those. The Russians are adapting to those systems and then jamming those systems. So the Russians eliminated the TB2. Now they have eliminated or not completely eliminated, they have reduced the capability of the HIMARS. Where just a few months ago, the Ukrainians were thinking to themselves, well, we're just going to march south. We can identify Russian units as we come into contact with those units, or we use intel provided by the United States, and then we target those Russian units with HIMARS, and that is going to win us this war. They can't do that now. So if they launch this offensive south of Orikhiv, it is going to be Ukrainian unit against Russian unit. It's not going to be these HIMARS strikes, these precision-guided strikes against Russian units just dug into these open fields. It's not going to happen like that. And that's what has the Ukrainians concerned right now, is that very possibility that they are going to launch this operation without battlefield support of the HIMARS. And the HIMARS, let's just face it, is the Ukrainian air support. That is the system that is giving the Ukrainians battlefield close air support, but just in a different way. Now, what we're also seeing is the use of Ukrainian air defenses, Western air defenses being deployed into Ukraine. Now, they're not moving these Patriot systems, these other systems that have been provided by Western nations along the line of contact. They are using these systems in the rear area to protect Kiev, protect key leadership buildings, infrastructure, that sort of thing. They're also using it in the west as well to protect Lviv and some other of these cities. In the west, again, they're not using the Patriot, at least right now, on the eastern bank of the Dnieper River. We're seeing very effective Russian airstrikes using GLONASS-guided glide bombs against Ukrainian targets along the line of contact, because the Ukrainians are not forward deploying those air defense systems, Patriots and what have you. Now, we don't know that this movement of Ukrainian forces that is going on, especially near Zaporizhzhia, is that a ruse? Or could it be just a telegraphed, poorly conceived operation by the Ukrainians that are going to attempt a large-scale operation against Russian forces south of Orikhiv? I mean, right now, that is the way it is looking. Again, it's the way the Ukrainians are positioning forces, moving forces. It does appear that the Ukrainians are preparing for something rather significant in this area near Orikhiv. Now, again, I say hearken back to the first Gulf War. The United States, when it fights wars, or it has traditionally fought wars, it will play very deceptive games. It will move pieces around the chessboard. They will attempt to make you think they are going to attack one place, and then they attack in another. Again, much like what occurred in Iraq. Now, is that happening in Ukraine? Difficult to say at this point. But if you eliminate that aspect, it does look like the Ukrainians are preparing for something near Orikhiv. Now, is the situation with the HIMARS, the disruption of the GPS system in this area, is that going to cause the Ukrainians to reevaluate what's happening on the ground? And remember, very few Western main battle tanks have been delivered to the Ukrainians. Around 14 Challenger 2s and probably an equal amount of Leopard 2s have been delivered. So realistically, one battalion set group of Western main battle tanks have been delivered to the Ukrainians. Most of the tanks that the Ukrainians are using right now are T-64s, T-72s, and even a lot of Slovenian T-55 upgrades. The Slovenians have handed over a number of those T-55 upgraded main battle tanks. So just as the Russians are using the T-55-54, as are the Ukrainians. It's a system that was readily available, sitting in Slovenia, probably not going to be used in Slovenia, and then handed over to the Ukrainians. Same soup, different bowl. So that's what we have for today. We are going to continue to monitor, report, and watching things very, very closely near Orikhiv, Zaporizhia. We are continuing to watch the battles that take place in Bakhmut and other areas. Again, we will continue to monitor. We will continue to report. Thank you for joining us today. And as always, have a good day.